That was you.
Thank you.
But you see, it's because you I take the majority. You thought that I mean, not that I do either, but I just thought somebody else something's going to happen. It hasn't. Everybody needs a lock.
Well, something forgot after lunch. When are you going? Well, we have time to think. No, I thought
I'm not sure. What we can do,
Is that one of the it's just that it's
yeah.
and it's the spot on the interest, and also, you know how things happen, somebody might have to do something, run off and do something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if we sort of, it's when it's closed, I've only got to get my bag, so
Yes.
It's
our alarm would be 20 minutes, or so it's half an hour.
just see how things work.
Yeah. Yes.
Just come to me, but I'll probably be gone by then. I'll be going as soon as I'm absent. So Christmas will be maybe. Unless I'll talk to Sharon about it. I'll let her know.
Welcome the dance teacher.
At least that's
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen.
we get to a bit where you're getting the questions. Just give me change the right. If you want to get out for questions, we have a discussion.
So we just do refuge. We go for refuge to all of us, so that all sentient beings may realize Buddhahood. We go for refuge to all of us, so that all sentient beings may realize Buddhahood. We go for refuge to all of us, so that all sentient beings may realize Buddhahood. How long am I talking? How long is the session?
On the timetable it says
Right. Okay. So I've got some nice questions from you. Hope you're up for more. More of me talking. Okay. So yes. Where is that question? Oh, yeah. So why is the feast offering considered mandatory in the Mahayana Gana? So there's a question about the Mahayana Gana. I thought it's a very interesting question. Why the feast offering? I thought it's a bit like asking, why is Christmas on the 25th of December? There's different ways you can answer that, isn't there? Yeah. Why do we need a day when we celebrate something? Why do we need a way of celebrating in any tradition? Why do we all do the same thing at the same time, in the same way? Or, if we're going to do something, why choose that? So I'm not quite sure which kind of question it is. So let's take it as given that if you're going to have a tradition and a custom and a mandala, sort of mandala samayas, then you have an agreement, okay, we're going to mark this occasion by this kind of event. So that's been agreed at some point. And if you ask, well, why this particular form? Well, in the Buddhist tradition, it's always been the tradition to offer food. And if you read the life of the Buddha, this is what people did. If they weren't monks or nuns themselves, they would invite monks and nuns and feed them, give them a meal. There's many stories about the Buddha being invited to give a meal. That idea that you create a situation, you put your energy into creating a situation. You do the preparations. You produce something that's the best that you can, and that's your way of expressing your appreciation of your guest. Please come. Please be my guest. So it's very natural, and it's the same in all human societies. It's very natural. So it's a very obvious thing to use as a focal point. I believe it's scientifically been shown now that if you're eating together with other people, you get more endorphins, or whatever it is. Oxytocin. Yes, oxytocin, did you say? Yes. So there you are, it's scientifically proved, so it must be. But it is, I think it's something quite lovely about the naturalness of it, to share a meal, to share food, and an expression of your connectedness with the mandala, the connectedness with the world, because you're offering the world, aren't you? You're offering your world. It's being imbibed, kind of like a real energy exchange there. So the symbolism is very rich, and it's also very enjoyable. Yeah, make sure it's enjoyable, that's part of it. And that creates a good, positive, auspicious connection with the lineage, because you're doing it with the idea of connecting to the lineage, connecting to the whole mandala. And when we do it on the full moon, which again has wonderful symbolic meaning, if you're going to choose a time, that's the time to choose it, isn't it? When the moon is full, when the full energy of the full moon is there. I think the whole of nature is kind of very tied to the lunar cycle. So Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question or not. But why is it mandatory? Simply because you have to say, if you're going to do things together as a community, you have to say what that is. And if you didn't say what it was, you could say in some ways it's arbitrary. It could be anything that we agreed to do, but I think it's a good thing that we've agreed to do. We made that the focal point of the monthly cycle, where we reinforce our connections, reinforce our pranidhanas, repent anything that we've done that we want to not repeat, and reinforce our determination not to repeat it. So yeah, it's good. So I don't know if that answers the question. Anybody want to say anything? Anyone want to argue? Any counter suggestions? Okay. But it's worth thinking about why. Like, you could say, well, can't I be the odd person out? Can't I be part of it and be the odd person out? It seems a little bit excessive. It's not as if it's telling you to do anything that one could really object to. Yes?
I suppose what just came to my mind, maybe just to clarify a little bit more, whether it's more of a ritual or a custom, or what's the
it's a ritual. It is a ritual because you are actually reinforcing your connections with the mandala of awakening. You could say, well, one could do that. You could do different rituals. It's true. So why have we agreed to this one? And because it's a tradition since the time of the Buddha, it's what my own teacher Khenpo Rinpoche told me to do. He said, do the feast offering on the full moon every month. Make sure you do that. So that's what I'm saying. That's good. I tell my students to do that. So we're continuing the custom. Does that?
Yeah.
And it's not as if it's a huge. It's not like go and kill a chicken or something, which you might have an objection to. It's really something that's easy to understand, I think, easy to connect to. What did you say?
Not a small child.
Yes, absolutely. So then, how do Vajrayana practices relate to other Awakened Heart Sangha practices, and why are they exclusive? Exclusive? What the Vajrayana practices? Well, they're not so much exclusive as they have to be carefully introduced so that you don't just have them out there as if anyone can pick them up and know what they're doing, and that's going to be particularly useful. And the other reason that I've tried to play down the Vajrayana side of things is because if you talk about it as if, well, automatically everybody's going to be practicing Vajrayana, well, it isn't obvious at all. So I think it gives a false impression. And what I'm teaching is giving you all the principles that you need to practice within the Vajrayana tradition. And what is actually the defining element of Vajrayana is quite subtle, actually. The way Tibetan Buddhism is taught is very much like, well, this is Hinayana, this is Mahayana, and this is Vajrayana, and this is how it's different, and then of course Vajrayana is best, so that's what we all want to practice. They say that, but at the same time they also say the thing about Vajrayana, it's for people with very refined spiritual faculties who are have a real faith in their guru, a real good, strong connection and faith in the guru, and that these practices can be quite dangerous. So they stress all this. In other words, it's an esoteric tradition. So if it's esoteric, what's it doing out on the table? So I go by that second message. I think, okay, if it's going to be introduced, it's going to be introduced as and when it's appropriate. Not everybody's going to want it. There's ways of practicing so-called Vajrayana which doesn't actually have the key element in it that makes it Vajrayana other than Mahayana. That's another issue, that a lot of what's taught as Vajrayana is in fact general to Mahayana. It doesn't actually have in it the element that makes it special. Although it's got all the name and it's got all the glory and it's got all the ritual, but actually when you look carefully, it doesn't have in it the elements that are necessary to call it Vajrayana. So why call it Vajrayana? I would rather not. I would rather talk in Mahayana terms, which is already challenging enough. And when that key element is there, the Mahayana becomes Vajrayana naturally. So some practices are somewhat more elaborate forms of Mahayana practices, which are getting more elements of the Vajrayana in them. But I don't feel particularly that people who are practicing within the Mahayana need those outward forms of Vajrayana actually. There are elements that they will need, which can be introduced within the context of Mahayana. And at some point, maybe we could have a discussion about to what extent is that the same or different from Vajrayana. But I think I want to create a Sangha ethos where we really think of ourselves as barely Mahayanist, let alone Vajrayanist. Because when you look at the way, how different we are from bodhisattvas, full bodhisattvas, we're just training bodhisattvas. And I think to focus on that doesn't introduce this kind of division into some people doing Mahayana, some people doing Vajrayana. If we focus on that, we're all aspiring bodhisattvas. And what we're actually practicing is very much a matter of choice, I think. And if you have those special faculties that are needed, you know, those especially sharp faculties for practicing Vajrayana, your Mahayana practice will become Vajrayana anyway. So that's why I'd rather just keep it that, yeah, there are some practices you have to be introduced to. And if you want to do those practices, then you will have to have a separate special introduction to them. But if you're not particularly keen on doing that, it's not like you've chosen a lesser path. So I want to avoid that kind of culture where people are talking as if, you know, because I've done a practice that's in a form that comes through the Vajrayana, I'm a Vajrayana practitioner. You're only a bodhisattva. And you know, when I say it in an exaggerated way, you think, you know, that sounds silly, but it creeps in very easily. And it makes me a little bit nervous to have anything that's suggestive of Vajrayana around, because then that kind of starts that kind of feeling of, oh, you know, what I'm doing, isn't it enough? Or is it not enough? Or should I be having some of that, whatever that is? And I don't think that's very helpful. But some people do have an affinity for some of the practices, and you know, we never know what we've been doing in a past life. And we don't presume to say, oh, well, I'm practicing it in a Vajrayana way. I'm practicing it as best I can. And I hope it will one day perhaps really connect to enlightenment, which is basically what Vajrayana is. Similarly, whatever else you're practicing, you know, we hope this will lead, you know, we're practicing Mahayana, practicing as a bodhisattva, and hope this will lead to us realizing the true nature of Buddha through practicing that. It's exactly the same. And you're going to go at your own pace, and it's going to depend very much on your connections, what mandalas you've been connected to in the past. So I don't want people to feel they have to force themselves to take on forms of practice that don't resonate for them, to be honest, because I've tried that, and I can't say it just works just like that. You do have to work with it, what resonates for us personally. Does that answer that? Okay, how do the Mahayana Gana and Srimala Gana circles relate to hierarchy within the Awakened Heart Sangha? Yes, they relate to hierarchy very much. If you're going to have a mandala, every mandala will have a hierarchy. There'll always be the center and the periphery, and nearness and distance from the center and the periphery. And the function of what's at the periphery, the function of what's nearer the center, are going to be different, but also mutually dependent on each other. So they're every part of the mandala has its importance and its function. The boundary between the inside and outside, where there's sort of a lot of activity going on about shall I enter, shan't I enter, am I in, am I out, that kind of. And then around the center, supporting the whole principle, and then the messages going in and out, and the hierarchy, the different levels of hierarchy as you come closer, so that the central hub, if you like, will have its own boundary. Am I in or am I out? Am I this side of the boundary? Am I on the other side of the boundary? It can be a bit emotional till you settle, and then you settle, and then you realize, oh, it's great having this boundary, because I know what I'm doing, they know what they're doing, and we work really well together. So hierarchy is not a dirty word. It's not the opposite of egalitarian society. It is an egalitarian society would have to be run on the principle of mandala. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to function. It wouldn't be able to organize itself. So it's natural that there will be a hierarchy, and the Srimala Gana is the closest to the central principle of what the mandala is about, what its vision is, what its aims are, what its ethos is, what its customs and its regulations and rules and ways of doing things. They are the closest to knowing what all that is and embodying all of that. So then the next level of the hierarchy are those people who are as committed as the Srimala Gana, but as yet not as familiar, and also not the central decision-making body. So there's consultation with the Mahayana Gana, but the Srimala Gana will come up with the well, the proposals can come from anywhere. Proposals can come, can be presented to be discussed and put on the 5-year plan by anybody, but the ones that will decide whether that's that's what we're going to put our weight behind or not will be the Srimala Gana. So the hierarchical arrangement is that the Mahayana Gana and the Srimala Gana are in close contact and discussing the same kind of things, and then Srimala Gana decides, okay, we're going to go that way, and then it's set in motion, and that's what the Sangha does. And the whole Sangha benefits from having that clarity of vision, that clarity of the decision, clarity of what we are all going to run with for now. And so it works as a hierarchy in that sense. So it works in a hierarchy long term in terms of preserving the whole mandala. It works as a hierarchy in the short term in terms of how decisions are made and we come to decisions and how they're made, and how they're then implemented and communicated through the whole mandala. Does that help? Is that what the question was about? No more questions? Okay. But it doesn't relate particularly to a spiritual hierarchy in the sense that it's not as if somehow there's a measure of one's level of spirituality, and if you're not in the central core, then you're necessarily spiritually less than somebody who is. Those kind of things are not so easy to measure, and they're not really to do with the functioning of the mandala. So hopefully, we'll get enlightened beings at all levels of the mandala, demonstrating how it's done at every part of the mandala. So, what is the relationship between the Kagyu Nyingma lineage in shaping the Awakened Heart Sangha? It's an interesting question, isn't it? What makes us Karma Nyingmas? What makes anybody a Kagyu Nyingma? Because their teachers are Karma Nyingma. And why are their teachers Karma Nyingma? Because their teachers were Karma Nyingma. But what made them Karma Nyingma? Other than you can say essentially it's the line of the transmission. So I can trace my transmission lineage through the Kagyu Nyingma teachers. But the Kagyu Nyingmas also have their own mandala of texts and customs and special teachings or favoured teachings and ways of doing things. So fundamentally we're following Kagyu Nyingma tradition of how to do things. It's never been very, everybody has to do the same, although there has been a tendency over the last couple of centuries, I suppose, of the Kagyu Nyingmas always doing, nearly always, not always, but, what they call the preliminary practices, 100,000 prostrations, 100,000 Vajrasattva practice, 100,000 mandala offerings, 100,000 guru yoga recitation, a practice that involves the recitation of what's called guru yoga. So you can think, oh, well, if you're Kagyu Nyingma, you should be doing that. But no, not necessarily. There's lots of Kagyu Nyingmas who don't particularly do that practice. There were lots of Kagyu Nyingmas who got enlightened before those particular practices were introduced in that particular form. So there's room for variation. But our lineage is clear. There's the Nyingma, represented by His Holiness Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, and this wonderful photograph. You've seen it, isn't it? Gorgeous. And through Milarepa was the, so they can see it, an original photo. And then the Kagyus are represented through Milarepa, who was a teacher of Gampopa, who was a teacher of, it's the first Karmapa, that's right, isn't it? Yeah. And then down the Karma Kagyus to Khenpo Rinpoche and all my teachers, Karma Kagyu and Nyingma, they've all had transmissions through His Holiness Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche of the Nyingma side. So all my teachers are very strongly connected through the Nyingma side and through the Kagyu side. So we're Kagyu Nyingmas because of that. And you can see there they are represented on our shrine very properly to remind us of our connection that way. And we have very strong connection with Milarepa through Khenpo Rinpoche and the yogic songs and his teachings in general. Actually, the songs are a very rich source of teaching for our Sangha. And on the Nyingma side, every day we're doing the Guru Rinpoche 7-9 prayer and mantra, which is the 7-line prayer and the mantra are considered to be, this is what all the devotees of Guru Rinpoche do. And this is how you become a devotee of Guru Rinpoche. And so, you know, we're right on course with that. We're every Nyingma, every follower of the Guru Rinpoche will think, oh right, okay, you're followers of this of Guru Rinpoche. And yeah, we work with the stories, we work with the texts and the songs that are associated with Guru Rinpoche. Very much though, the 7 lines is the heart of our Nyingma connection. Does that help? From both sides, you're getting these essence teachings, which are the main focus of this Sangha. The essence, the indestructible heart essence, the pointing out instructions for the true nature of mind. This is the heart of both the Kagyu and the Nyingma lineages. So all the pointing out instructions that I give using the DHB and the THB is all coming directly through my own teachers and transmission lineage. So you can think of that as being the essence of your lineage connection. And then all the other teachings around the living the awakened heart are all standard teachings from the they're all standard from the Buddhist point of view. They're all standard from the Kagyu Nyingma point of view. They're you know, the standard teachings that are underpinning everything. So could be Kagyu Nyingma, Gelug, Sakya, could be any of that. So I hope that helps. So the view is very much coming through the Kagyu Nyingma view, the Dzogchen and Mahamudra view or essence teachings. Okay, so that's that. Am I right that in Buddhism it is considered to be very important to be as peaceful as possible as you die? Yes, why not? Yes, good. If you're so lucky to die in a peaceful way, it's always good. But even if you die in an apparently peaceful way, when your mind and your body part company, whatever peace you might have had in their circumstances in this world, rather than inner peace, is replaced by whatever's coming next, which could be a storm. It could be this is what in Shantadeva's Bodhicharvatara, he describes graphically how the messengers of death come and great wind of karma is blowing you along and you're being beaten and hacked about. And nice scary stuff. So you can't be sure that what will follow a peaceful death will necessarily be peaceful. But what's more sure is if your state of mind is fundamentally, in this lifetime you've actually able to maintain a stable, basically peaceful state of mind, that is a really good sign that after you've died that will continue. And that's a lot to do with what I was talking about this morning, the relaxation and the confidence in one's own true nature. If you can maintain that, and like Khenpo Namgyal says, you know, and this is all just like a dream and an illusion. The fundamental nature doesn't move. If that kind of peace is there, great. You know, that's going to, whatever happens to you after death, you'll be able to weather it because you have that fundamental relaxed confidence, whatever is happening. So I don't think you need to be obsessive about it must be totally quiet and peaceful when I die, because that might end up disturbing you more than just being able to not mind. You know, like There may be somebody's got a radio blasting, and you know you can't tell them, can't stop people talking and carrying on. So that if you actually feel peaceful in yourself, that's not going to disturb you so much as trying to stop it and trying to make it quiet, as it were. I don't know if that's the yes.
So a question comes to mind in mindfulness practice.
Mm-hmm.
The skill is to turn towards discomfort or something and to open to it.
That's right.
And so my question for me is, when we're dying,
yes,
and there's discomfort of fear,
yes, yes,
is it to open to that?
Yes, yes, exactly the same. Exactly the same. Yeah, exactly the same instruction. In fact, you know, what works in life will work in death. So that's why, you know, now is the time to practice.
I find that very reassuring.
Good. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, one should practice always preparing, you know, you live as you intend to die. And you'll find it's a really great way to live. Yeah. Okay, how do you work with the fear of death and make fear an ally? Interesting, isn't it? I was connecting this with the other questions that were coming up, and the thing that kept coming up into my mind was the connection between belief and fear. Really interesting. Very close connection between belief and fear. What we believe and the intensity with which we feel fear. And sometimes these beliefs are quite hidden. We're quite unconscious of them. That's why, you know, we need to do a lot of mindfulness practice and meditation practice and awareness practice to really, and communication practice actually helps as well, to really find out what are those beliefs that are holding me back. I don't think I'm believing anything, but I'm really scared. Oh, so what am I believing? Why would I be scared? If I'm not believing something, why would I be scared? You know, I'm scared because maybe I'm afraid of, you know, if I'm about to be destroyed or attacked or hurt. I believe I can be hurt. I'm doing this kind of, no, I don't want to be hurt, I don't want to be hurt. So, okay, so I believe I could be hurt. So what do I believe I am? I believe I am something that could be hurt. What do I believe I am? Look and see, what is it? The more you look, the less you find. And yet at the same time, the more you let go of your beliefs, in a sense, the more grounded and more resourced, the more qualities, the more confidence you have. You find, in some sense, you're finding more. So when we don't find what we truly are, and we don't have confidence in what we are, when we're not embodying what we are, we're afraid. Holding on to whatever little bit we can find to hold on to. So when you notice that, you have noticing that tightening and that fear reaction, that's the time to think, okay, so what am I believing about the nature of my being and the nature of my life and the nature of reality? And can I actually let go of that belief? How would it be if I didn't believe that? How could I find that confidence that we talk about in the Discovering the Heart of Buddhism? That fundamental confidence that is not dependent on conditions. Because that's the opposite of fear. Does that help? So then make fear an ally would be an ally in the sense that when you notice you have that fear reaction, then to go turn towards it and work with it as a messenger, if you like. It's a messenger from the mandala of awakening saying, look, there's something you're missing. because you're not recognizing your own nature, and you're not relaxed, you're not confident. What is it you believe? And do you really believe it? So that's one way. Maybe there's other ways. How do you deal with the fear that comes from the ego mandala collapsing? Yes. So one would think, okay, so my belief in my ego and in myself in this way is leading to fear. So if I were to let go of that belief, then I would have no fear. So that sounds like it should work quite smoothly. But it's interesting that people are laughing. It doesn't work that smoothly. As we get near that edge of what we really believe in, it's like it really intensifies, and you can have a very strong, almost physical, well, I'm saying almost physical, really physical fear reaction going on in your body, because somehow your body and mind have been working together to kind of persuade ourselves that when I'm feeling, when I'm holding on to this very tightly, I'm safe. And then we've kidded ourselves for a long time that means I'm safe. And then somebody said, look at it more carefully, and you realize it's not safe. And then panic can come in very strongly. You can have palpitations and heartbeat, sweating and sort of freaking out, and goodness knows what. So it doesn't necessarily follow in a very smooth way, because the body and mind have kind of are working together to create this mandala, this deluded mandala, or this ego mandala. And so it's kind of been pretending that it's your confidence. So you kind of think, when I feel, I'm doing something, I really know what I'm doing, and I'm with my friends, and I'm getting lots of feedback, I'm a really confident person. And then, you lose your job, you lose your partner, you lose your home, you lose your money. And then, you lose your reputation, and suddenly that's not there to support you, and you realize you're terrified. Like the whole bottom has fallen out of your life. You feel you are nothing, you've got nothing, you're worthless, you're failure, or whatever else you like to tell yourself. And your whole confidence goes. Lack of confidence, another word for it is fear. So that's the time which would be an opportunity for you to think, okay, so now what do I rely on? When all that's gone, what do I rely on? Your openness, your clarity, your sensitivity, your worth as a human being is exactly the same. It hasn't changed at all. You can trust that. And there's a moment there where you could, if you like, start again without all that paraphernalia. So that sounds like, wow, that's an opportunity. It's almost like going through the 9 steps of the what's it called? When people have Alcoholics Anonymous, isn't it? You reach rock bottom, and then that's when you find the confidence to build yourself up. To build up a more genuine kind of confidence. But sometimes, you're not aware that you're holding on to all of that. And yet, when you start to investigate the nature of your mind, this fear starts to come up. Or it can come up quite strongly. And I sometimes think that maybe it's because people have practiced in a past life, and their insight is actually very sharp, very acute, and they're not quite ready for that intensity of insight. So that there's a kind of, as the insight comes up, maybe in a past life they had a very strong fear reaction at some point and closed down. And then now, whenever they go close to that boundary of the insight, the fear comes in with it. There's nothing else for it, but it's just to keep going with that, not to mind the fear. It's not going to do you any harm. It's just a fear reaction. But it can be unpleasant and unsettling, and not what you expected. But it's not a bad sign. You can take it. Keep going. But at the same time, be kind to yourself, because your body does need to readjust. So your whole system has to readjust. So you let it come in little by little. As you relax and you become more confident, and let the insight come in. But yeah, I don't know if that deals with that question.
It's just slightly linked.
Yeah.
It was almost because it's almost there that the trust in the openness, clarity, sensitivity isn't as deep either, as one might,
as one might have thought.
Balance,
yes, yes, because we liked openness, but not that open, or clarity, but not that clarity. Not as clear as that.
You lose trust in this world, but you're building trust in.
That's right. You're building trust in there. So there is that edge there. And at first you think, openness sounds great, and clarity sounds great, sensitivity sounds great, and then you get really strong experience of how intense the sensitivity can be, how, shattering the clarity can be, and how groundless the spaciousness can be. And you think, oh my God, no, I didn't mean that. But, okay, there will be a reaction, but still come back to it gradually. Kind of, as you say, there's an edge there to let go into openness, clarity, sensitivity. The confidence has to build up.
Could you link that into Sangha somehow?
Well, I think it does help if you know that the important thing is to be held by the refuge, the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. Then when you feel that fear, then I have this refuge, I'm following this example, I have the adhisthana of the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha to rely on. I don't need to panic, I don't have to rush off in a wild panic. I can just, slow down. There's this famous story of Trungpa Rinpoche. She used to tell it, but I think I've read it since, about how I think it was up in Samye Ling, and this woman was meditating, and then she had a very terrifying experience of emptiness, and she came charging out of the shrine room into the surrounding countryside or woods or wherever it was, and she encountered Trungpa Rinpoche, and she's looking completely terrified, and Rinpoche says, "It's all right. I'm not here either." Something like that. Yeah. Okay. So the next one is, how do we use mantra or prayer approaching death or danger in a way that isn't just grasping at being saved and still coming from a place of fear rather than acceptance? So we have to accept that this is probably going to happen to us at some point in our life, very likely happen at the time of death. That we're not in that state of completely relaxed confidence and realization of the illusory nature of all things, and it's all appearance emptiness, it's all sound emptiness, it's all bliss emptiness, it's all awareness emptiness. Ha ha ha. Like a dream, like a rainbow, like a magical illusion. Apparently when Rinpoche had realized it was an earthquake, the nuns came up to tell Rinpoche it's an earthquake, he just laughed. Like he would. Oh, it's like a dream, it's like an illusion. It's like sort of just appearance emptiness. I mean, he's consistent, that man. That's one comforting thing, I think. When I think of Rinpoche in the Bardo, I will not forget that message, because he says it every time you see him. It's like a dream, it's like an illusion, it's appearance emptiness. So in the Bardo, when I think of Rinpoche, it's a dream, it's an illusion, it's a dream. Yes, nothing's changed. So There's something to be said for keeping your message simple and consistent, isn't it? So, and an interesting point was Daden was telling me that when the earthquake struck in Nepal, she was in her retreat house, and she stepped out of the retreat house, and she said very quickly she found herself reciting the prayer to Guru Rinpoche. In Tibetan it's Dusum Sanji Guru Rinpoche, and we do it Guru Rinpoche, Union of the Buddhas of the Three Times. And she found herself automatically just reciting that over and over. And I think it's good to have a habit like that. She felt very reassured to have a habit like that. Because at that time, you're so shocked. It's difficult to know, you know, what to think or what to do. And to have something that comes automatically to mind is very helpful. Like I was saying, this Kamapachina mantra. It is very helpful because the chances are that, you know, we are going to feel fear. And it's going to take us a while to kind of settle into the meditative absorption of it's all a dream and an illusion. And in the meantime, we want to be kept on course. So it's good. It's good to have something you recite. Like I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dharma, I take refuge in the Sangha, or even Buddha, 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 Buddha. Or Caroline was asking me online, she's saying, well, I've mentioned Karmapa Chena. Can we do Karmapa Chena? Or Chena? The Kamba way of pronouncing it is Karmapa Chena, and since Karmapa is the 16th Karmapa was Kamba, we might as well call it Chena, Karmapa Chena. If you're more Lhasa accent, it would be Kieno, K-Y. So you can have either. So Karmapa Kieno or Karmapa Chena. He answers to both. Karmapa Chena. But it's very quick, isn't it? Kamapachena. Kamapachena. And Kamapa is the activity of all the Buddhas. So you're calling on the activity of all the Buddhas. And we have this special connection with it through the our lineage of all these Karmapas. We've had 17 Karmapas, sort of bringing that Karmapa energy down the ages to us. So we've got this strong connection with it. And I think a third Karmapa is recognized as being an emanation of Guru Rinpoche, so they're very closely connected. Oma Hom Vajraguru Pema Siddhi Hom. Maybe I won't have time for that. But you could have Oma Hom. You could have Oma Hom. You could have Karmapa Chena. You could even have Om Gati Gati Paragati Parasamgati Bodhisvaha. That's considered a very protective mantra. So you could recite that. So you need to think for yourself, what could I bring quickly to mind? And then you can almost do a little exercise that if you're suddenly shocked, to see how quickly you can say whatever it is that comes to mind. No, there's nothing wrong with that. Somebody was even asking, could they say Lama Shenpen? I guess it depends what you think of me. As Rinpoche said, well, if they have faith in you, you know, if for you I represent your closest connection with the lineage of awakening, well, why not? If you feel that's your closest connection. But yeah, because you know your faith would make up for the weakness of the link on my side, if you know what I mean. The link is there. So hopefully that's answered that. So yes, and I made a note here saying that being able to say something like that, I think, does help us relax. You kind of know, Kamapachena, I can now relax, which of course is, you know, allows your confidence to re-establish itself, and you can ground yourself. when we've died and no longer have a physical body, how do we practice? How do we remain calm? Same as now. Same as now. You know how to remain calm. And in a way, you don't have the body getting in the way. You don't have the body fear reaction there. So, you know, you've got less to deal with in that sense. That's what I hope. Yeah. I suppose you have to die really to know for sure. I'll remember dying, but I can't be sure of it. Anyway, it's the same advice, exactly the same. And how do we deal with Mara striking back after we've taken the vows, such as refuge? Example, having doubts. So that doubts is interesting because there's two kinds of doubts. There's our intelligence, our natural intelligence that is going to carry on asking questions. You know, how do I know what the Buddha is? What is the Buddha? How do I know what the Dharma is? What is the Dharma? How do you know what the Sangha is? Yeah, what is the Sangha? How do you relate to the Sangha? How do I relate to the Sangha? Am I really relating to the Sangha? Do I really have faith in the Buddha? These are all intelligent doubts. So they're good. And keep going. Keep very open to finding an answer, finding something within yourself that, what was the intuition that got you to take refuge? You intuited something, what was that really? So really go back there as if you never took refuge at all, maybe sometimes, just to kind of clear your mind of any clutter. Just think, what does it really mean? What do I really take refuge in? Without thinking, oh, you know, I'm supposed to have complete faith, because that's not going to help your faith. So do feel free to really ask those questions. But then there's another kind of doubt, which is simply almost like what I was saying earlier about a kind of belief, you know, like I'm such a stupid person that whatever I do is probably just ridiculous. So, you know, I've taken refuge, it's probably just for some ridiculous reason that, you know, I'm always doing these ridiculous things. So there you've got a real kind of negative mandala there that's not helpful at all. And you're kind of know you're just doing it and you're creating yourself, you're creating a sort of, you know, tangle for yourself of complication. I think just to notice that is thinking. That isn't actually, it's not even useful thinking. You don't need to get caught up in that. You could choose to step out of it and become simpler. So some doubts are kind of lead to insight and simplicity, and some doubts that just get you stuck. I think you've got to recognize the difference between them, really, and notice those kind of reactions that you're probably prone to generally if you're having taken refuge and then you start having doubts. You probably have a habit of doing that in your life generally, and it's a pattern you need to really look at. I don't know if that helps. I don't know who was asking that, but does anyone want to ask anything more about that? Yeah.
Just ask about habits.
Yeah.
You're living with, and it just keeps coming back again.
Yeah.
You can address that, or is it just?
Yeah. Well, you know, habits. That's what they do. They keep coming back, don't they? But then, you know, you recognise this isn't. I don't have to go there. It's not helpful. It's not. I don't have to go there. It comes back, and you choose again. I don't have to go there. I can go somewhere else. Yeah. We have to train ourselves. Well, I hope that's helpful. How is communication training useful to us at the moment of death? And the suggestion is communication with ourselves, with others, with the Guru? Question mark? Oh no, maybe that's different ones. Communication training useful to the moment of death, useful with ourselves, with others, and with the Guru. So I think those three different questions, four different questions. Four questions?
It was all related in the one question.
Okay, right.
Ways of reflecting on good communication.
Right.
Death, how do we talk to across cells.
Right.
Communicate with our loved one. I think.
Yeah.
What's the relationship between you and someone with that?
Right. Do we need a bit more air in here? Yeah, you could open the door. It's turned into a sunny afternoon.
We could just do it just for a very short while, couldn't we? Bit of air and then shut it again. Got a leader out.
Okay, so where was I? Okay. So that was an interesting question. How does communication training, how is it useful to us at the moment of death? So I was thinking about that. By doing this kind of, finding those places in ourselves and how that feels, and learning to choose not to go to those places and to find a place within ourselves that's more confident and more relaxed and more resourced. Of course, then when fear reactions at the time of death start to come up, there would be triggers reminding us of how to get back to that place of confidence. So, and also for us to recognize when we're doing a completely useless belief thing, like believing in ourselves, having to defend ourselves and thinking there's actually no point in that, I don't want to go to that place, I want to go to that relaxed and confidence place. It's surprising how we can choose, actually. So, and this is the kind of thing you find when you look at your communication. So often when you're communicating, if somebody's saying, you're hearing something or you're in a situation which makes you nervous, you're nervous because you have some kind of belief that in fact you don't have to go that way. You can learn to train yourself not to go that way, which would help at death the same as it helps in life, there's no doubt. So that is communication with ourselves. If we have this attitude towards ourselves of, you're so stupid, you never get it right. I mean, people tell me this is what they think about themselves. You're just rubbish. You might as well forget about it. Go and hide. You're just useless. Apparently, people talk to themselves like that. Well, yes, you've got to learn to say, well, hang on. Hang on, who are you? Who are you to talk to me like that? What do you know that I don't know? Kind of hang on. You don't have to take that on board. But if you're not even noticing you're doing it, it tends to kind of creep into it when you're listening to Dharma. You're opening to the Dharma, and the next thing you know is this voice is telling you, yeah, but it's not for you because you're that kind of person who, they're not. You don't mention that people like you never get it right and are quite hopeless. You're looking for the small print all the time. There it is. There it is. It says some people. That's me. No hope for them. No hope for people like me. Apparently, that's what people do. So it's really important to learn to recognize when that's happening and not go there. You can tell yourself something totally different. All beings have Buddha nature. That must include me. There are no exceptions. So come on, hang on, that can't be right. All beings. So I wouldn't talk to anyone else like that. Come on. But it's quite interesting how these things unpack. There's a lot of insight you can get as you unpack these kind of complicated ways of thinking. And of course, working with ourselves, the magic of that I've noticed over the last few years is when you're working with other people in these kind of exercises, you see that actually other people, you yourself are just the same as other people. Other people are just like yourself, another version of the same thing. It looks very different the way they're expressing it, But then when you work out, well, why are they behaving like that? What is behind that? What is the value that they're seeking behind that? You know, and you find, oh, it's the same as the one that's behind me, behind it. You know, what's going on for me? The same kind of tension, just maybe a slightly different choice of strategy, but exactly the same impulses are there, and they're not bad, basically. I mean, poor strategies, yes. You know, it's trying to defend yourself by attacking other people isn't going to get you the love you want. It's not a good strategy, but it's still coming from a good place, wanting to kind of show, well, I am a good person. You could love me, so you know, how dare you attack me, and how dare you criticize me? You know, actually, perhaps there's a way you could communicate that in a way that's more likely to produce the connection that you're really looking for. It's really interesting and very kind. I find it very kind. And of course, then that will help you to open up to the teacher, to the guru. One of the things that I'm finding as a teacher of Dharma is that, you know, in the texts, it all says, you know, faith in the guru is the important thing. And then as Westerners, we tend to think, oh, well, this person that's teaching me Dharma, I've got to have a good relationship with them. But actually, you know, when she said that, you know, I mean, she had no right to speak to me like that. I mean, she's always criticising me. You know, now I've got to go and talk to her about my practice. Oh, well, actually, I have done a little bit of good. I did do that. I can talk to her about that. That was not too bad. Sort of going there with a kind of an agenda of trying to show the teacher that somehow you're not as bad as you really think you are, or whatever it is. You know, some kind of, rather than simply going in there genuinely connected to yourself and your own confidence, and genuinely open and listening to what the teacher can offer you, which isn't that complicated, actually. You know, you don't need to make a big deal about student-teacher relationship. It's not, you know, it's not. I mean, in the stories, it sounds amazing, doesn't it? But in actual fact, it's just relating to another person. But it's another person who you've got reason to really connect to their genuineness. So you come in with your genuineness and you relate to their genuineness. That's all there is to it, really. So being able to communicate with yourself, being able to communicate with others, enables you then to just be simple and open, and transmission can happen. It's in the simplicity of our openness and, strangely, in our confidence. It's not a confidence of, oh, well, okay, I understand it all. No, I understand better than before. I understand as well as you do, or whatever kind of thing you might be thinking. It's just a confidence of being able to be exposed. I want to see where I'm going wrong. Maybe this interview will expose where I'm going wrong, and I'm looking for that. You know, and so there has to be some sort of genuine connection, and then, oh, maybe I wasn't as wrong as, maybe I'm okay. Well, that's really helpful. It's really helpful to know, oh, actually, it's okay. But I have to have been genuine for that to mean anything to me. If I've been pretending and I'm told it's okay, then I think, oh, I've got to carry on pretending then. But if I've been genuine and I'm told it's okay, I think, oh, just carry on being genuine. So, yeah, that's how transmission happens, in fact. So it does help. I think, you know, working with these communication is going to help on all levels. I really believe that. Okay, so why is it that in the West we have a narrow vision? I told you this morning. Yeah? We have a narrow vision and worry more and communicate with ourselves so harshly. So I told you that this morning. Why? Why? I think it's our materialistic view on things. And we tend to think that our materialistic view is just how things are. It's not a belief. This is just how it is. I mean, science tells us, you know. Study the brain, you find out about the mind. I mean, obvious. So, you know, it's quite narrow. I mean, brain is not very much, is it? brain matter. Oh, that's inspiring. I take refuge in my brain. Oh, I love your brain. We sort of don't really think like that, do we? When we think like that. And we don't sort of think it's, you know, a sensible person thinks like that. You know, once you start talking about religion and heart, oh, you know, very, very, not like, you know, experimenting on the brain. Good solid stuff. Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? I think that's how we tend to think, don't we? I'm sure if you were really studying the brain, you wouldn't think it was good solid stuff at all. Very mysterious. Very mysterious. How is it that my world I live in is projected out from this grey matter? That's, you know, I can get the grey matter to flash messages out through my equipment, but I have no idea really what it is or what is that, and how my world manages to project itself out of that. Quite a different thing, isn't it? My world. It's very, very strange. And quite marvellous, quite wonderful, but very strange. Anyway, that's one of my theories. And the other thing I thought was quite interesting, I was reading a book that you lent me the other day by Fromm, talking about fear. And I just remembered one part of it where it was talking about the breakdown of society and how we've ended up being oppressed by a generalized sense of I need to fit in somehow, but I don't know how, and I'm not sure what the rules are. It's true, isn't it? So a generalized sense of, you know, I don't fit, there's something wrong with me, there's, you know, almost on every front, you know, I'm not a proper this, and I'm not a proper that, and I'm not a proper, you know, I recognize that in myself, you know, I'm not a proper scholar, and I'm not a proper worldly person, and I'm not a proper Dharma person, and I'm not a proper citizen, and I'm not a proper, you know, whatever it is, you know. So I've got all these standards. I'm not a proper housewife, I don't keep my place clean, I don't do this properly, I don't do that properly. So all these little kind of references floating around, that they don't even form one particular reference, and they don't, there's not even one particular system of values even. They're just all floating around, and I'm trying to live up to them all at once. And you know, I'm not very heavy on myself, but I guess if I was, I could be heavy on myself from all these different points of view and feel, you know, there is also this category that some people have been brought up with, which is failure. There's such a thing as a person is a failure. Or life. I mean, I wasn't brought up with that, and I don't identify with it, but I often hear people using this phrase, you know, like I feel I'm a failure. And I think, what's a failure? How can a human being be a failure? But it's floating around. I mean, who's the person who judges whether we're failures or not? It's quite amorphous, isn't it? So we all end up judging ourselves. So it's very odd. Very odd. Whereas, you know, that's quite unfamiliar, I think, to, you know, where I'm coming from. You know, when I'm taught by Tibetans, that's quite an unfamiliar way of thinking. You know, like your baseline is you can, if you decide, you can do good. So get on and do it. Right, why aren't I? Because, you know, let myself get distracted. Now I'm going to go and do some good. And this is what's good. You know, I'm quite clear about what's good and I can do it. Maybe that's the difference. Because when we do good, we think, yeah, but it's not good enough. Yeah. And who's saying that? Where's that coming from? Where's this? You know, it's not like, oh, well, you know, there's this group of people I have to please. It's almost like these voices I have to please. these little, judgmental voices saying you should be better at this and what, should more this, more that. Who are they? Who do I care about? Whose opinion do I care about? It's just interesting, isn't it? Who's this mysterious, people will think, or the whole world will think. My mother used to say that, the whole world thinks. Yes. So that's just a bit of a shot at perhaps why that is. Could you say more about the mandala boundary of death and the potential that exists at that point? Yes. Like in general, the moment of death is said to be a wonderful opportunity for practicing Dharma. And if you're a great yogin, you could look forward to because you're resting in the clear light, the clarity of your own true nature. That's how you meditate. You're resting in that and, letting everything like a dream and illusion. And then when you die, then your connection with this body is broken. And the obscurations that are caused by that body collapse. And so then you get, really full-on experience of that clear light nature. And if you cannot be terrified, if you can actually maintain your awareness, then you reach enlightenment at that point. Yeah, I think I'll do that. But a good test to how well you might be able to do that is the way you fall asleep at night. Because apparently the same thing happens when you fall asleep. That the clear light, your clear light nature dissolves back into the radiance of the clear light, and then your ego mandala structure is so terrified that you go fast to sleep before you even know it. So if that's what happens when you fall asleep at night, it's probably what's going to happen when you die. So you can try and train yourself out of that, but I don't know how you do it, except by practicing as continuously as you can during the day, because when that falling asleep happens, you're not there to, you're not, how are you going to stop it? Because you've fallen asleep. You see what I mean? Sort of, you've got to have trained yourself beforehand so that when it starts to happen, you can notice it and you can somehow find a way of maintaining your awareness through that. And it's very, very difficult. I remember there were, I think, was it Gesogye Rinpoche or one of, maybe it was Chökyi Nyima Rinpoche, but somebody was saying that his father, yes, it must have been Chökyi Nyima Rinpoche, saying that he used to listen to the yogins coming to talk to his father, and they used to say things like, I can maintain my awareness, the clear light nature in the day, no problem, and in my sleep, no problem, but just that moment when they fall asleep, I can't quite get that, Whereas we're the opposite. We might get a little flash of it every now and then in our meditation, and that's good. But it's a long way from, adepts like that. So yes, there is that kind of opportunity there, which is, would be good. So eventually we can aspire to becoming great practitioners so that we can practice at a time like that. But we shouldn't be too shocked if we can't, and if we come round after having died, realizing, hang on, I've died. Oh dear. And then just practice as usual. Just think, okay, just think you're getting up in the morning, you're going to go and sit in your meditation place, and you're just going to do your meditation, you do your refuge, you do your meditation, and you'll find it goes like a dream, apparently. It goes really well when you do that, when you die.
Oh.
Yeah, because there's nothing to obstruct you. So, if you've built up that habit during your life, then when you do that when you die, it should be really good.
But it's just a dream.
Yeah, it's just a dream, and you've taken refuge in the Buddha, and there's, the Buddhas, maybe they appear to you, When you take refuge in the Buddha, maybe you really can get a sense that they're really there, and you're really being totally taken into their care and protection, and then you're projected out to be reborn somewhere where you can continue your Dharma practice without any more obstructions. Who knows? But, quite hopeful about that. Because there isn't anything else there. So if you're doing your practice, there isn't anything else other than your practice. So, nothing there other than the Buddhas to support you. Could be good, couldn't it? So I'm quite hopeful about that. And could you say more about fixing? What is it? When it is grasping, what is it when it's grasping? And what is it when we let go and align with our true nature and then are able to benefit others? There's a similar question in this another section. Said. Yeah, I think the question is, when we say we wish to save all sentient beings, aren't we trying to fix something? So when I say fix, it's like trying to fix samsara. So you can fix something, I suppose, if you want to use the word fix, but you can't fix samsara. You can only help. You can only help in samsara. You can't actually make it all right. So it might help you to get a better sense of proportion and balance if you're simply helping rather than trying to make it all right and getting anxious about the fact that you can't make it all right. So that's my point when I'm saying you can't fix samsara. So that's not to say that it isn't good to do things to help, with the knowledge that it's going to be limited, but at least it can help. You can help beings in samsara, but they're only really helped if you're showing them and helping them to take steps to break their attachment to samsara, which is, as I said this morning, it isn't this world, it's attachment to the thinking that creates this world and creates birth and death and creates that whole endless cycle. So to the extent that you can help beings to break that cycle, you're really contributing to their long-term well-being. To the extent you're just kind of helping them through the day, give them something to eat, give them a bit of company, give them something that they, that's going to make their life more pleasant, that's obviously in line with the Bodhisattva, intention to benefit them, but it's kind of short term, and we're always looking for the long term. So I think in terms of grasping, it really is when we lose our sense of proportion, when we're trying to help ourselves or others. We're trying to fix it so that we are sure that nothing's ever going to go wrong, that we're going to always be protected, or other people are always going to be protected, they're always going to, somehow we're going to solve all their problems, and we're getting anxious because perhaps we haven't done enough. And so whenever that anxiety is coming up and that tension is coming up, there's a sign that actually we're getting things out of proportion, and that we could relax more and recognize, well, we can only do our best. We can only do something that will help for now. What's really important is the connection with the bodhicitta that is actually going to empower me to be, and empower them to go beyond birth and death. So that I was mainly getting at that, I think. And yeah, I think it's very different, isn't it, from letting go and aligning with our true nature. Obviously, we can't do that straight away. I mean, I think one of the questions that came up was, will taking an action in a way consciously intended to avoid bad karma interfere with moving towards spontaneous, skillful action? It's a similar sort of question that could I right away act in such a way that was relaxing into my true nature with confidence and bringing beings towards enlightenment. That would mean, ultimately that would mean my activity would be spontaneous. It wouldn't be contrived in any way. But that's when we've realized emptiness. and we've got stabilized that, and we're well on our way. Before that time, we can recognize from time to time that things are happening spontaneously. I'm sure all of you've recognized that from time to time, that without any intention you turned up at the right moment and were able to say the right thing or give the right gift without, how did that happen? It seemed like magic, and we call those things coincidences, don't we? But I think there is an element of the spontaneous activity going on in us all the time. I mean, we are Buddhists from the very beginning, but because we don't have enough trust and enough relaxation, enough realization of emptiness, our thinking is getting in the way all the time, and yet we're having to rely on it. We're having to use our thinking to plan our day and to help other people and to look after ourselves. And so there is that tension going on, and I think it's important not to think, oh, well, if I make my mind a blank and just don't think anything, it'll be all right, because that's already too contrived. It has to be a genuine realization of emptiness, or emptiness naturally working through us. So you can't contrive non-contrivance. In other words, if you're actually notice that you're doing something that's negative, that's going to create bad karma, and you think to yourself, oh yes, but I think this is spontaneous activity, I should leave it alone, you're in a bit dangerous territory. But so it's more, perhaps you should start practicing on good karma to start with, because at least, if you're doing something good, even if it's not spontaneous, it's still good. Whereas if you're doing something negative and it isn't spontaneous, then you've done something negative, which is going to set you back. I don't know if that addresses the question. Is that what the question was?
The part of the question was, I think, whether doing something that was skillful, or which one thought was good, in a contrived way, because one had some latent concern about one's future rebirths and karma, whether that would somehow downgrade the skillfulness or the good, the valence of the
No. I think that's a very Western way of thinking. It's a very familiar way of thinking, that I should have a pure motivation without any hope for any result for myself. I think it's very Western, very idealistic way of thinking about pure morality. I think, I've read, philosophical writing on morality. Tends to present pure morality. In limited reading I've done there, I've read about pure morality having no intention for any benefit for oneself in the future. That would be pure morality. But in the Buddhist way of thinking, that would be a spiritual accomplishment that would arise through having realized the nature of emptiness. So morality in terms of what one should do would be more in the form of something that you would contrive to do. And that would produce the environment in which you would be able to make spiritual progress if all the other conditions were there, and eventually realize that spontaneous activity of the Buddhas, which would have that quality of having no intention for your even intention at all, really, because it's an interesting distinction, though, isn't it? Because when I've mentioned this idea, I said to, because a lot of people have this idea, I shouldn't be wanting good karma for myself. That's selfish. I should do it just because it's the right thing to do. And I've mentioned this to Tibetans from time to time, and they've smiled very sweetly and said, "Oh, that's very high." I just think in terms of karma, and even if they're quite advanced, they will tend to say, out of humility, I just think in terms of what's going to make good karma for myself, as a way of covering up their bodhisattva motivation, that they're working on, of course, but they will say, but I'm doing it really for myself. You know, I'm just a very ordinary practitioner doing it for myself. But,
so they're really not, are they actually just thinking about their own, their own karma and not really thinking it across? Or do they just naturally link that, therefore it's good for others? They link that, therefore it's good for others, very strongly. If it's good for me and it's good karma for me, it is good for others. I'm dedicating it for others, but I will get these good results, so I feel very cheerful. Sooner or later I'll get the good result of this. And at the same time working on love and compassion, at the same time working at realizing emptiness. But not being afraid to think this is good for me. You know, it's not going to get in the way. It's not. I mean, yes, eventually when you give up all sorts of old concepts altogether, yes, you reach a stage where you have to go beyond good and bad. But that's a very advanced stage, and you do that with the guidance of your teacher at the right moment. And then you get what you call transgressional behavior practices, where people have to eat, things that are revolting, or, do things that are against their usual concepts. They kind of break all their concepts of what's good and bad. But obviously that's a very dangerous stage of the practice, because you get that wrong, But on the other hand, even in the Mahayana Sutras, it talks about the bodhisattvas being attached to good, and they have to realize there is no good or bad, and that's after all their hard work, leading these good lives for sort of eons, now to be told there isn't any good or bad, they die of shock. There isn't anywhere to go. It's just you're already there. Like, what do you mean? I've done all this for eons and there was no point. So yeah, that's a really important question around this contrived and not contrived, and a result and not wanting any result, or hope and fear. And yet, if you're still not enlightened, then you need to have the hope for enlightenment and the fear of non-enlightenment. And yet, ultimately, when you reach enlightenment, there is no hope nor fear. But if you try to then pretend you don't have hope and fear now, what would ever get you to practice Dharma? Actually, it's a contrived no hope and fear. Well, do you want me to try and get to the end?
How long is the end?
Not far. Well, I've done all these, and the others I think probably covered. What is the lineage's view on the choices we might make of a future life while in the bardo? Okay, could we introduce a training for death?
Doulas.
Doulas, what's that?
The doulas are trained midwives, unofficial midwives, but they're really well trained.
Oh.
And they take women through the process of birth. And there's a quite a strong movement for people to be death doulas.
Oh, right.
To actually be like midwives through the process.
Right. Yeah, well, that sounds a good idea.
And it is happening. It's happening.
Well, hopefully, at some point we can have some, train people to specialize in working with this whole process of dying. Excellent.
Good.
Feed that into the 5-year plan. Could we use your name? Well, that's when we've had that question. What attitude and approach should we take with someone who's dying?
Well, I've written a whole book on that.
Yes.
So reference my book on that. That's my best shot. What is the role and importance of Guru Rinpoche at the time of death? Well, what is his role in your practice now? You know, if you find you really, you know, when you think of Guru Rinpoche, it fills you with confidence and faith and connection, and you know, you feel, yes, Guru Rinpoche, then say Guru Rinpoche when you're dying. It's fantastic. Fantastic, you know. Or say Buddha. Say whatever it's really you have faith in, because it's, you know, they're all expressions of the same reality. What practical thoughts do you have about practicing death if we're struggling for breath and panicking? Yes. Yes, I think of that. I think of that. But, you know, it could well be that when you're dying, you don't actually know if this is it or not. It would be kind of nice to know this is it. Like when my father was dying, they said, this is it, we're going to pull out the life support, and he's dying. I thought, that's how I want to die. I want to know I'm dying. I told my dad, you're dying, this is it. You know, because then you think, okay, I don't need to struggle because this is it. Whereas if you don't know if it's it and you're struggling for your life, you know, at what point do you know that's it? So I think it's a very tricky moment to know when to give up struggling, and to know that, okay, now this is the death process, it's likely to be uncomfortable, but I'll just go with it. So I guess that's one of the pranidhanas and wishes one makes, that one will know at the time that this is dying, and therefore not to panic, you know. Well, even if you're trying to save your own life, you don't panic, but somehow there's more energy behind the way you're fighting it, isn't it? You're fighting for life. Whereas if you know this is it, you stop fighting for life and you just start to just trust that, just trust the process. So in general, I think it's a good mantra to say don't panic. Because when you're panicking, you're not, it's the opposite of that relaxed confidence, isn't it? And even if you're trying to live, you can still try to live with a kind of inner strength. And then, you know, if you live, that's great. You don't need to panic. And then if it's the time for dying, then if you, again, you have that relaxed inner strength there. Okay, now it's it. It might be uncomfortable, but this is it. This is the process. So again, you don't need to panic. The panic isn't going to help. Although, you know, when things are, you know, as you say, you're fighting for your breath, you're fighting for your life, there will be that moment, I think, where you're not going to be sure. You know, should I keep fighting or should I give in to it? So I guess you just wait till it happens, because it's going to be different for all of us, isn't it? There's no point thinking too much about how it's going to be. I think to myself, the most important thing is to think, whatever happens, my baseline is to come back to that inner confidence. So whether I have it as I die is not so important as having it after I've realized I've died. You know, when you realize you've died, if you can then link into that inner confidence, that's going to be good enough. That's, you know, if you remember your practice, remember the bodhicitta, remember the refuge, and really you have died, and therefore you do have that certain amount of freedom once you've died. So I think to myself like that. I think I might make a mess of the actual dying bit, but afterwards, you know, there'll be more time, and all the habits of my practice and my life will kick in, and that's when, you know, I feel more confident about how that will be. But yes, we can always hope that we have a really good, you know, good death where we got time to think about it, time to let go, time to relax, know when it's actually going to happen, and that would be ideal, wouldn't it? But There's so many different ways we die. So I'm ready for all of them. Basically, I'm expecting to make a bit of a mess of it. You see how I deal with anything in life. Okay, so I didn't answer the one about what's the lineage's view on how choices might be made in future of a future life while in the bardo, but maybe I have answered it. I mean, there is the idea that when you're in the bardo, you can think you want to be born in the Pure Land of Sukhavati. We mention it every time when we do the Samantabhadacharya Pranidhana. So if you really feel inspired by that, sort of find out more about Amitabha's Pure Land. I mean, this is Amitabha here presiding in our shrine room. So, if you really want to connect to Sukhavati, that's one option. You can connect to Guru Yoga very strongly, like through Guru Rinpoche, or whatever connection you feel very strong. The Buddha Dhamma Sangha. That's we say Guru Yoga, but refuge in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha is equally good option. Or who knows, if we really get on with our yogic practice, we might actually end up doing the clear light. Just relaxing into the clear light at the moment of death. I mean, if you want the lineage view on it, they would say that was ideal. Next best would be, they have lists of it, and next best would be, next best would be, next best would be. But basically it comes down to, if you have faith in the refuge and you have bodhicitta motivation, and very good if you can do what Sylvie said when she said, well, I did all my confession and then I dedicated all the punya and I was ready to go. That's brilliant. Or if you can meditate on everything like a dream and an illusion and nothing changes anyway because, resting in the true nature of mind, brilliant. So I think each person has got to decide what they're going to rely on at any particular stage in their life. I just think that's what I'll do. Come on, Pacino! Gone. So, thank you for very interesting questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, not too bad. Okay. We dedicate this punya to the enlightenment of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings realize complete and perfect awakening. May the heart's awareness awaken in the unawakened. Where it has begun to stir, may it never fade, and may it awaken fully. Are there any people there?
There were 6 people online. I don't know who they are.
Oh, so Crystal, hello. Yes. Oh, and incidentally, yesterday your offerings were so generous. So generous. It's nearly £8,000. So think of all that. Let's rejoice in all that punya. Wonderful offerings. So I'll be able to make some of that offering to Rinpoche for his various projects, for the projects that are already going on, and then which is the nunneries and also the preservation of his teachings, digitalizing it all and making it all available so that people, we will have access to all his teachings in the future. Fantastic things that they're doing with that. And then, of course, helping his community in Yomo. He's got 100 families in Yomo that are his disciples who've all lost their homes. So they all need help. So I can send that to him and from all of you and tell him that it was raised at the time of you taking refuge and the Bodhisattva vows and the Sangha building and at the Sagadawa in here, and to really thank him for his blessing that's made all this possible. So thank you very much, everybody. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you everybody very much for a wonderful event. Thank you for all your help, all the help you've done.